The dust came first, before the town showed itself. A low yellow cloud that rolled across the alkali flat, like smoke from a distant fire. Elias Thorne rode into it with his hat pulled low and his horse stepping careful, as if the ground might open beneath them. Animal was a dun gelding, old enough to know better than to fight the bit, and Elias let the reins lie slack across its neck. He had not spoken to the horse in 2 days. Red Hollow appeared as a smear of weathered boards and adobe against the white glare of the desert. A single street ran through it, flanked by a mercantile, a livery, a saloon called the Broken Spur, and a low stone building with iron bars on the windows that served as both jail and courthouse. Behind the buildings, the land lifted into broken red hills, and beyond them the mountains stood blue and silent, too far to matter. Elias dismounted in front of the livery. The hostler was a wan-eyed man named Pike, who took the reins without a word and led the dun away. Elias stood a moment in the shade of the overhang, feeling the heat press against his shirt like a hand. He carried no saddlebags, only the rifle in its scabbard and the Colt at his hip, both worn to the color of old bone. He had $43 in a tobacco tin sewn inside his vest, and a letter folded small in his shirt pocket that he had not opened in 6 months. He walked to the saloon inside. The air was thick with tobacco and sweat, and the sour smell of spilled whiskey. Men stood at the bar or sat at tables playing cards with slow, deliberate movements. No one looked up when Elias entered. He took a place at the end of the bar and laid a coin on the wood. The barkeep, a heavy man with a scar across his lip, poured him a glass of something clear and set it down without asking. Elias drank half and set the glass down. "Heard there's an auction today?" The barkeep wiped the bar with a rag that looked older than the town. "Crow's got some Apache girls. Taken off a raiding party last month. Says they're fit for work." Elias looked at the amber ring the whiskey left on the wood. "Work. Household, laundry, whatever a man's got need of." The barkeep's eyes slid sideways. "Sheriff's taking bids. Starts at noon." Elias finished the drink. He left another coin and walked out into the light. The square in front of the courthouse had been cleared. A rough platform of planks had been nailed together. A man in a black coat stood on it talking to a crowd of perhaps 30 men. Harlan Crow. Elias had seen his kind before, traders who moved between the forts and the border towns, buying what others had taken and selling it again for profit. Crow's coat was too clean for this place, and his boots shone. He held a ledger in one hand and a quart in the other. 6 girls stood chained to a post at the back of the platform. They were young, none older than 20, perhaps two as young as 14. Their hair had been cut short in ragged strokes, and their dresses were torn cotton shifts that hung loose on their thin frames. One had a bruise blooming purple across her cheekbone. Another stood with her head bowed, but her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. The others watched the crowd with flat, unreadable eyes. Elias stayed at the edge of the square, half hidden by a wagon. He watched Crow raise his quirt and call out the first lot. A girl of perhaps 16 stepped forward when prodded. Her wrists were manacled, the chain short enough that she could not lift her arms above her waist. Crow turned her slowly, displaying her to the men like a horse at a sale. "Strong back," Crow said. "Good teeth, speaks a little English. Starts at $50. A man in a checked shirt bid 40. Another raised it to 45. The bidding went slow, then stopped. Crow brought the quirt down on the post beside the girl. Not hard enough to strike her, but hard enough to make her flinch. 55, he said, going once. Elias felt something move in his chest, small and cold. He had seen auctions before. He had seen worse. He had done worse. The girl was sold for $60 to a rancher with a red face and a straw hat. He came forward, paid in coin, and led her away by the chain. She did not look back. Crow moved to the next. This one was taller, her eyes dark and steady. She looked directly at the crowd, and when Crow raised the quirt, she did not flinch. The bidding went higher, $80, then 90. A man in a black vest won her for 110. He was a gambler from Tucson, known for his temper. When he took the chain, the girl lifted her chin and spat at his boots. The crowd laughed. The gambler struck her open-handed across the mouth. Blood appeared on her lip, bright against the dust. Crow smiled and moved to the next girl. Elias turned away. He walked back to the livery, took his rifle from the scabbard, and checked the loads. 5 rounds. He had another dozen in his belt. He put the rifle back and walked to the mercantile. The storekeeper was a thin man named Amos, who wore spectacles and spoke softly. Elias bought a sack of flour, a side of bacon, 2 blankets, and a coil of rope. He paid with the last of his money and asked for a canteen. Amos filled it from a barrel and handed it across the counter. "You going far?" Amos asked. Elias did not answer. He shouldered the sack and walked out. The auction was still going when he returned to the square. 3 girls had been sold. The 4th was on the platform now, a small one with wide eyes and trembling hands. Crow was asking $30. No one bid. Crow frowned. "She's young," he said. "Trainable. Still no bids." Crow looked around the crowd. 25 then. For the lot of the last 3, a murmur went through the men. Someone laughed. Crow's face darkened. Elias stepped forward. The crowd parted slightly. He walked to the platform and stopped at the foot of the steps. Crow looked down at him. "You bidding, mister?" Elias looked at the 3 remaining girls. The small one stared at him with something like hope, then looked away as if ashamed. The tall one with the split lip watched him without expression. The last one, the one with the fierce eyes, stood apart, her shoulders straight despite the chain. "I'll take all 3, Elias said. His voice was low, almost lost in the wind. Crow smiled. "All 3, that's generous. Let's say 200 for the lot." "I got $43. The smile faded. "Then you ain't buying nothing." Elias looked at the sheriff, who had been standing silent at the side of the platform. The sheriff was a big man named Tolliver, with a belly that strained. His vest, and a star pinned to it, carried a shotgun across his arm. "Law says you can't sell what ain't yours," Elias said. Crow laughed. "These are spoils of war, mister, taken fair. Sheriff here can vouch." Tolliver nodded once. Elias looked at the girls again. The small one had begun to cry, soundless tears cutting tracks in the dust on her face. He turned back to Crow. "I'll give you the 43. I'll sign a paper saying I bought them legal. You keep the money and the paper. I take the girls." Crow stared at him. Then he laughed again, louder. "Out. You're a fool, mister. Out. But I'll take your money." Elias reached into his vest and brought out the tobacco tin. He opened it and counted the coins onto the platform. Crow scooped them up and dropped them into his coat pocket. "Cut the chains," Elias said. Crow hesitated. Tolliver stepped forward. "You've got no claim here, stranger." Elias looked at him. "I just paid for them." Tolliver's eyes narrowed. He lifted the shotgun slightly. "You paid for 3. There's 3 left on the block. You walk away with what you bought, or you walk away with nothing." Elias did not move. The wind came up, carrying grit that stung his eyes. It felt the weight of the Colt against his hip. He thought of the letter in his pocket, the one he had not opened. It was from a woman in Santa Fe who said she had seen his daughter's grave. He had not known his daughter was dead until he read it. He looked at the girls. The fierce one met his eyes. She did not blink. "I'll take all 6, Elias said. Crow snorted. "You got no money? I got a horse. Worth 100 easy. I'll sign it over." Tolliver stepped closer. "You're done talking, mister." Elias drew the Colt in one motion. Hammer clicked back. The sound was loud in. The sudden silence, the crowd froze. Crow's hand went to his coat. Tolliver raised the shotgun. Elias pointed the Colt at Crow's chest. "Cut the chains." Crow looked at Tolliver, looked at the crowd. No one moved. A long moment passed. Tolliver lowered the shotgun. "Cut them loose," he said. Crow cursed under his breath but took a key from his pocket and unlocked the manacles. The chains fell to the planks with a dull clank. The girls stood still, rubbing their wrists. Elias lowered the Colt but did not holster it. "Walk to the livery," he said to them. They moved slowly, uncertain. The small one stumbled. The fierce one caught her arm and steadied her. They walked past the crowd, heads high. Elias backed away, keeping the Colt trained on Tolliver. When he reached the edge of the square, he turned and walked fast to the livery. Pike was waiting. The dun was saddled. Elias took the reins and led the horse out. The girls were standing in the street, watching him. He mounted and rode to them. "Get on," he said. They looked at each other. The tall one with the split lip stepped forward. "We go with you?" "For now," Elias said. She nodded once. He reached down and pulled her up behind him. The others climbed onto the horse. As best they could, two behind her, one in front clinging to the saddle horn, the small one held in the tall one's arms. The horse snorted but stood steady. Elias turned the dun south, toward the broken hills. No one followed. They rode 3 hours without speaking. Sun dropped low and red, and the shadows stretched long across the sand. The girls clung tight, their bodies warm against his back. He felt their breathing quick and shallow. When the light began to fail, he stopped at a dry wash lined with mesquite. He dismounted and helped them down. They stood in a loose circle. Watching him, he took the blankets from the saddle and spread them on the ground. Built a small fire with dead wood and cooked bacon in a tin pan. The smell rose sharp and good. He divided the meat and passed it to them on pieces of flatbread. He had bought in town. They ate in silence. When they were done, the fierce one, the one he would later learn, was called Nali, looked at him across the fire. "Why?" she asked. Elias poked the coals with a stick, didn't like the look of the men bidding. "That is all?" He looked. At her eyes were black in the firelight. "That is all." She nodded slowly. "You have a name, Elias?" "I am Nali. This is Chato's daughter." She touched the tall one's shoulder. "Yazi." "The small one is Tatsa, the other Sitsi, Kiona, and Lita." Elias repeated the names in his head. He did not speak them aloud. They slept close. To the fire he kept watch, the rifle across his knees. The night was cold, and the girls huddled together under the blankets. Once Tatsa cried out in her sleep, a small, sharp sound. Nali pulled her close and murmured something in Apache. Elias listened to the wind move through the mesquite. He thought of the letter in his pocket. He thought of the grave in Santa Fe. He thought of the village he had burned 17 years before. The screams that had followed him across 3 territories. He did not sleep. In the morning, they rode again. Land grew rougher, cut by canyons, and strewn with black rock. Elias kept to the low ground, avoiding the ridges where a man with a rifle could see for miles. They spoke little. The girls rode in shifts, trading places when one grew tired. Yazi rode behind him most often. She did not cling so tightly as the others. Once she asked him where they were going. "South," he said, "toward the reservation at San Carlos, if we can make it." She was quiet a long time, then she said, "They will not want us there. We have been gone too long." Elias did not answer. On the 4th day, they saw riders. They were coming from the north, 6 men on good horses. Elias recognized Tolliver's gray and Crow's black coat. They were following the trail he had left, not hurrying, certain of the direction. He led the girls into a narrow canyon and told them to wait. He rode back a mile and took position behind a boulder. When the riders came into view, he levered around into the rifle and fired once over their heads. The men stopped. Tolliver raised a hand. "That you, stranger?" He called. Elias did not answer. "You took what wasn't yours," Tolliver said. "Come to collect." Elias sighted along the barrel. "If you come any closer, I'll drop 2 of you before you reach the canyon." Silence. Crow's voice carried thin and high. "We got paper says they're property." "They're not property," Elias said. Tolliver laughed. "You're one man. You can't keep them. I can kill enough of you to make it hard." Another silence. Tolliver said, "We'll be back." "One more." They turned and rode away. Elias waited until they were out of sight, then rode back to the canyon. The girls were waiting. Nali had a knife in her hand, a small blade she must have taken from the mercantile. "They gone?" she asked. "For now." She put the knife away. That night they camped in a shallow cave. Elias built no fire. They ate cold bacon and drank from the canteen. Tatsa sat close to him, her shoulder against his arm. She did not speak, but she did not move away. He looked at the stars. They were bright and close. He thought of his daughter, whose name had been Sarah. She had been 8 when the raiding party came. He had been away, riding with the cavalry. When he returned, the house was burned, and she was gone. He had searched for 3 years. The letter said she had died of fever in a camp near Santa Fe. The woman who wrote it had buried her under a cottonwood. He felt the letter in his pocket, sharp against his chest. Nolly sat across from him. "You are thinking of someone?" He looked at her. "A child," she said. "A girl." He did not deny it. "She is gone." "Yes," Nolly nodded. "Many girls are gone. Many sons. Many mothers. Sleeping under the blanket. These are not mine, but they are mine now." Elias looked at the small shapes under the blanket. "You'll get them home." "Home is far," she said, and changed. He did not answer. On the 7th day, they reached the edge of the reservation. The land flattened, and the grass grew thin and sparse. A line of cottonwoods marked a dry creek bed. Beyond it, a cluster of wickiups stood in a shallow valley. Elias stopped the horse. The girl slid down. Nolly looked at him. "You come with us?" He shook his head. "They won't want a white man. They will see what you did. They'll see a killer." She studied him. "You are not what you were." He looked away. "I don't know what I am." Tatsa came forward and took his hand. She placed something in his palm, a small stone, smooth and black, polished by water long gone. She closed his fingers around. "It, for luck," she said. Her voice was soft, like wind through grass. Elias looked at the stone. He put it in his pocket beside the letter. Nolly said, "If you change your mind, find us. Ask for Chato's daughter. They will know." He nodded. They turned and walked toward the cottonwoods. The girls looked back once. Tatsa waved. Then they were gone, swallowed by the valley. Elias sat down a long time. The wind came up and moved the grass. He took the letter from his pocket and opened it for the first time in months. The words were simple. Sarah had died in March. The woman had buried her with a doll she had made from corn husks. There was a marker, small stone with her name. He folded the letter and put it back. He turned the horse north. He did not look back. Months later, in a town called Benson, Elias stopped at a saloon for a drink. The barkeep poured him whiskey and said heard a story from down south. 6 Apache girls walked into San Carlos last fall, said a white man brought them, said he gave them his horse and walked away. Elias drank. "Folks say he was a ghost," the barkeep went on, "or a dead man walking." Elias set the glass down. Maybe he was. He paid and walked out. The sun was setting, red and low. He stood in the street and felt the stone in his pocket, smooth against his fingers. He thought of Taz's hand, small and warm. He thought of Nolly's eyes, steady and unafraid. He thought of Sarah. He walked to the livery and saddled the new horse he had bought with money earned breaking broncs. He rode south. The land was the same dust and heat and silence. But something had shifted inside him, small and quiet, like a stone settling into place. He did not know if he would find them again. He did not know if they would want him if he did, but he rode anyway, and the wind carried the dust behind him like a promise, or a forgiveness, he could not tell which.